He's Howard Eibach, former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 30 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Henry, we're back with another episode. Today, we're going to examine a document that was released just recently by my employer, the Association of National Advertisers. It is a 51-page document. I don't have it in front of me. It's called Better Creative Briefs for Better Brand Building. It was issued last month.
A tome.
A tome, yeah. Now, they published something similar to this in 2017. It was much shorter. It was more of a white paper. And you and I discussed that document way back when, early in our early days of the
It
Brief
was the
Brothers.
genesis of this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And interestingly enough, we both mentioned before I hit record that there is one aspect of this document that hasn't changed. Maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we won't. Which was the chord that was struck that you and I then discussed. So before we have our discussion about the quality and the conclusions of this document, let me just say I was invited to participate, and I was interviewed by a key facilitator of this document. And my name is listed in the resources, I guess, near the end of the document. So I was very proud to have my 2 cents in. And I think this is a valuable document, no matter what. One of the things that I think is interesting from my perspective, because Henry, I've been doing this for 20 years. When I started out, you had to look very hard to find documents like this to learn how to write a brief. There were books that had chapters in them. There were articles online, but now there are a lot more of these kinds of things in these trainings. And we've had on our show guests who do training like this too. So 20 years, it's taken a long time, but I'm delighted to see more of this. So I am pretty certain that you have to be a member of the ANA before you can actually get a copy of this. I'm not quite 100% certain about that, but in any event, you can see it's about 51 pages, and it does a survey, and it includes examples of creative briefs, and then it has essays by the participants, some of the thought leaders, CMOs, creative directors, brand folks, and a couple of others giving their assessment. I'm going to just start off and give you my top line 2 cents worth. In spite of what I just said, I'm all for more of this kind of information, because I think we all need to learn more about how to do this thing. We all struggle with the document. My assessment of this paper, this research, if I were to give it a letter grade, is B-. And here's why. As a writer, and I'm a creative, and you're the strategist, but as a writer and a creative who teaches brief writing, one of the things that I emphasize is that this is a writerly document. We've talked about this many times before. One of the first lessons that any writer learns when they raise their hand and say, I want to be a writer, is learn how to show, don't tell. So at a 40,000-foot level, this document is far more telling than showing. It includes, I think, 5 examples of good briefs, although I would dispute the quality of some of these briefs. But out of 51 pages, there's far more telling. This is how you should do it. This is what a good answer to that question should look like, than actually demonstrating what it looks like. Here's an example of what a good brief looks like. And even further, which is what I do in my training, I'm going to show you how to go about thinking, to change your thinking, to get a better answer. So it's got a couple of good examples of briefs, and I am rather proud to say that they chose as an example of a good brief my friend Sarah Walker Hall's Kiwi brief, which is over 20 years old. But you know what? Age does not diminish quality, not in the slightest. And it is, it's 126 words worth of powerful insights and inspirational language. And of the 4 or 5 briefs that were included as examples, okay, I'm biased, but I think it's the best one. So I'm eager to get into the nuts and bolts of this with you, but let me give you a chance to give your top line assessment of this research.
It's funny because it's your employer, but
Hmm.
I'm a little less harsh on it, and I'll tell you why. You know, we have to look at what you can realistically expect from such a paper, and I don't think the intent here was to have an MBA in brief writing, right? Like, I think this is a good starter for the clients that are interested in improving their briefs and getting to learn about briefs. Remembering that the ANA is the Association of National Advertisers. This is the clients in the ad agency that are in the ad industry, sorry, that are the ones that are meant to consume this. So I'm gonna grade it on a curve in that sense, and it's I think that the more thinking about the brief that clients do, the better. So any contribution is a welcome contribution, because I think that's one of the reasons for this podcast, right? Is like to necessitate it was necessitated a discussion of creative briefs and how to do them well. What does it mean to have a good creative brief? What does it mean to be a good creative brief writer? So, uh, you know, I think there's a lot. There's obviously they cover a lot of ground in 51 pages, but you can only go so deep into each area. But I think there's some salient points. My biggest disagreement is the one that we've uh, beaten to death over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, which is the part about, it's going to sound, this is one of those things where the language is loaded because they talk about collaboration. And collaboration is always supposed to be good, right? It's supposed to be something that, you're supposed to seek out. But I believe that in this space, as a strategist, I don't want to collaborate with the client on my creative brief. What I want is to get the client's point of view in their brief or their comms brief or their marketing brief or whatever brief they give to the agency. And I'm going to take that as an input and I'm going to take it along with all the other inputs that I'm going to, including my own personal experience, my expertise in whatever subject matter, and my research, their research. All these things are going to go into the pot. So I would say, give me your point of view, and then let me do my magic on my end, and we'll come back to you with the ideas based on a brief that I write. I'll collaborate, of course, internally with our team and our people, my research analyst, my creative director, etc. But I think too many cooks in the kitchen. And we've talked about it ad nauseum. It adds another layer of approval, more time for back and forth, and I use the word frequently, litigating statements and words and phrases in a creative brief that, in my mind, they never even really need to see.
Well, I agree with you. And one of the essays that's included in this paper, this research, is from I think a senior marketer, might have been a CMO, where she revealed that a pitch that she was putting together a brief for was abruptly stopped at the 11th hour because two senior stakeholders couldn't agree on KPIs. And
Yeah.
now, I'm the first to say that KPIs are important. I worked in direct marketing. A good chunk of my career was in direct marketing, so I understand the value of measurement. But I say in my training, when a creative is handed a creative brief, the last thing they look at is KPIs. And the examples of the briefs in this paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
I now let me finish this. Let me just start. To have a whole pitch derailed because they couldn't agree on a KPI, to me seems almost trivial. Because if you if you agree on what's the key element, single-minded proposition, whatever you want to call it, and then you disagree on the KPIs, that's putting the cart before the horse. It's
Yeah, but
missing the point.
I would say you can't get to a single-minded proposition. So KPI is a very sterile word, but if one stakeholder thinks this is an awareness building campaign and the other stakeholder thinks this is a much lower funnel, like, drive, you know, purchase, the creative approach is going to be drastically different. Okay. And so aligning on essentially the KPI is the measurement to see if we're improving the problem. Okay. But when you read between the lines, if they can't agree on a KPI, it's because they can't agree what the problem is. And
Well, see,
that's a big
okay,
problem.
okay. No, I agree with you there. And this little tangent that we've gone, this little rabbit hole we've gone down is an example of what happens when you get lost on things that are not. I don't want to say they're not consequential, but they're not as consequential. I get what you're saying that if you can't define the problem, then things like a KPI are going to become essential. But it's details like this that I think get in the way of the bigger, more important thinking about what a creative brief is and what it's supposed to be.
Well,
And that,
for sure, it's not part of the creative brief, but the idea, and the paper does talk about like lack of internal alignment. And
right.
so, but what I'm saying is it's a bigger deal because the KPI is just how you're measuring the problem. So again, if the KPI is awareness in a global brand tracker versus intent to purchase, right? Those are two drastically different things. So one stakeholder is saying we need to measure awareness because they think that the problem is not enough people are aware. And the other guy is saying enough people are aware. Our problem is that people aren't intending to purchase this and instead intending to purchase the competition. So that's at a high level a big disconnect. But I think the good part of the anecdote that you shared was that they stopped the RFP, because what
Yeah,
normally happens is they don't stop the RFP, and then
that's true.
you come in with a bunch of creative, thousands tens of thousands of dollars worth of man hours have been spent to present, and the CMO and the CEO disagree on like what the problem is. And the agency is sitting around saying, "What the fuck are these guys doing?" Like
Well,
seriously.
yeah, the bigger issue too is thank goodness these two senior stakeholders were there in the first place, because they're often, on the road, absent in another meeting, and they haven't even seen the brief. They haven't seen the pitch. That's, I think, as valuable a point as what you've just pointed out. So yes, how are we getting everybody aligned with with the project at hand? Okay, so what are some other things about this research paper that you found good, bad, indifferent?
Um, so I broke it up into a few sections. I mean, it talks about, okay, the why briefs fail. And we just talked about, lack of
Hmm.
internal alignment, which it also talks about what makes a brief good is the converse, right? Like the opposite is to get alignment. And I'm not talking about like, getting a brief approved by a client, but I'm talking about like making sure that we're aligned on what the problem is and so forth. Um, you know, uh, Briefs that are just like deliverables lists, like the usual suspects
Hmm.
of the stuff that makes a brief bad, like a junior writing a brief with no guidance, um, vague objectives, um, you know, those are the I think there was a quote of a bad brief is a road to nowhere. I agree with that. Like,
Yeah, yeah. There was a line that I highlighted. So keep talking, because it was about the role that juniors should not play. And if I can find it quickly, we may have to do some creative editing.
yeah.
Um,
So So there was a section about like, or there was a points made about what makes a great brief, and these are things we talk about, right? Like
Right.
to be emotionally resonant, right? Like we're trying to get people to change their minds or to form
Hmm.
an opinion of our brand or to act differently at retail. So that requires understanding human decision making and human emotions and things like that. So being clear, being human. Again, the usual suspects. The brief should be brief, right? Like
Yeah.
this isn't a dissertation. This white paper can be 51 pages. Your brief should be one. Um,
Right. And you know what? I still get pushed back when I do trainings. My briefs, I need to include everything in my briefs. And I say, well, here are examples of briefs that they don't do that. And they say, well, I can't do that. But then they'll concede, I can probably get closer to that. So at least there's an acknowledgement that its purpose is focused. So here's the page. This is one of the pages from
what
from the
I would love to be a fly on the wall in one of those trainings and say, let me ask you something. How many of the most memorable pieces of advertising that you can think of do you think were written that the assignment was initiated with a 5-page brief? Because
Well, there might be the answer might be quite a few because the creators were senior enough to say, screw this fucking piece of bullshit. I'm going to write my own brief.
they threw it in the trash.
They
Yeah.
they threw it away and said, I'm not going to tell you that it's going in the trash. I'll bring the brief to the meeting and I'll pretend that I used it, but this is the actual brief that my partner and I used, but we're not going to tell you. I mean, you and I have met a number of these very senior creatives who would have not a whip, single inhibition about doing that because
Cam
they know
Day
that,
comes to mind, right?
yeah,
Like
George Tannenbaum.
yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't hesitate, not for a second. It's
Um,
like, that's a piece of
Now
crap.
we're talking about a murderer's row of elite
Right.
creatives. This
But,
is
you and
the 1929 Yankees.
right. But I think there are a couple of young whippersnapper creatives that we've met who are either still in school or recent graduates
Yeah.
who you just suspect we're not going to put up with any guff. They may not be able to go out head toe to toe with the executive creative director or a senior client, but they're not going to back down instantly and just say, you're right. They're going to make an argument
But
and do it.
when they mature into mature creatives, and again, we're talking about the right hand side of the bell curve, right?
Right.
These people
Exactly.
are going to figure out how to navigate and get what they want. Like,
Yeah.
my thing with the client, the client wants to see the brief. I'll show the client a brief.
Oh,
That's
yeah. I,
yeah,
I get it.
but
Well, here.
that's not the brief that the creatives are going to see, you
Right.
know.
Well, now here's what I wanted to point out. This is on a page. This is page 10 out of 51. So it's very early on in this document. And again, if let me just say that if you work for a company that is a member of the ANA, you can get a copy of this document. I don't think this is meant for general public consumption, so I'm not going to release it, but I'll show you excerpts. So on page 10, they ask the question, before you write a brief, great briefs are different in important ways from briefs that aren't good. The second bullet point, it says great briefs are written by senior level client or agency side executives who believe in the power of a great brief, have invested the time it takes to write the best one possible, and have leveraged every available resource. And I highlighted this line, don't look at brief writing as a growth opportunity for a junior staffer. The brief is too important. And you said as much in a previous podcast, and I got in trouble for speaking this out loud at a training session where it's like junior should be seen but not heard. Oh boy, I heard back from powers that be when I spoke that out loud because the company where I was doing training believed it was important for juniors to have a presence in these meetings. It's like,
They do.
okay,
They should have a presence, and that presence is to observe and
yes,
and
yeah,
learn while their elders and wisers do their business so that so they can analyze who's good and who's bad based on what the reactions are and what the work is.
yeah,
I don't have
yeah,
look, junior people have a role, And they eventually, the idea is that they stop being junior people so that they can be the decision makers and the talkers or whatever. But to get there,
Right.
you need to train, right?
Right. You need
And
to hear your seniors articulate what the objective is, what the, why are we here? What are we doing? So that you know what to expect. And then you can comment intelligently.
so I have doctors and hospitals on my mind lately. Well, how does it work? And your father was a physician and my father is a
Yep.
physician, right?
Right. Right.
How does it work? You go to medical school and like in your third year, you start doing rotations, right? And you're a
Oh,
group
yep.
of 20 young pups following it doctors around
Hmm.
with your mouth shut and your ears open, right?
Right.
And then you graduate medical school and you go into a residency where they teach you to crawl, they teach you to walk, and then they teach you to run. They don't give you a scalpel to do a brain surgery the first day of your residency. That's just not the way that it works. Now
Right.
we're not doing brain surgery here, but it's serious. There's millions of dollars at stake. Like, why would you give the first day pilot student, aviation student, the yoke? Like that's crazy. Like you have to, there has to be a basis laid down for them. And in our business, part of that is observing.
Call it a learner's permit. Maybe we should have learner's permits for young marketers so that they can be in the meetings and listen, but not say anything. Let me transition to something else in this document about what a good brief should include. And I just highlighted one word. You can see this is page 11. It's the next page. Here's these must-have elements. Objective. Now my first objection. This is why I kind of gave this a low grade. It's a minor point, but a significant point. When you create a brief, topic headings are not questions. You think differently about the way you answer, the way you address the information that goes in there. And here are topic headings. I prefer, and I think the best examples of brief ask a question. What is the objective? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Who are we talking to? So anyway, that's a minor but not insignificant challenge. Look at the bottom here where I've highlighted deliverables. I can't tell you how many people in my training have said, if I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, it's a bad brief. I need to know, is it going to be a print ad, a radio campaign, a website, all of the above? And look here, good for them to say a deliverable can simply just give me a big idea. I just want some great thinking. We'll figure out what the tactics are later on. Now, the briefs that I use in my training often just say that. Not all of them, but some of the really good ones do. On the other hand, the brief may not explain what the deliverables are. Everybody in the room knows what the deliverables are. It's just
Uh,
not included on the
I
brief.
listen. I just had I just had this happen. Okay. Um, without naming brands or anything, we received a brief from a client who had briefed general market agencies on an assignment, and the um, they wanted to do the same assignment but for the Hispanic market. And the nature of the assignment was to come up with a new SKU within their existing line of products. Okay, so this is a packaged goods company. They have an existing line of products and they want a new SKU, but they want that SKU to be a surprising collaboration with some brand outside of the category. Okay, because time was of the essence, I took the general market brief that the client had done. And this client in particular was a very good client, very educated client from a creative standpoint. This is the kind of client you want to have as an agency, the kind of client that wants to do work that gets noticed, that wins awards, that's in the popular culture, that people say, oh shit, did you see that?
Mm.
So it was a dream assignment. We didn't have time. So this general market brief is excellent. What I need to do is layer on the Hispanic part of it. Like, okay, which are the brands Hispanics gravitate toward? What are and so I took large chunks of the client brief and I used it. and the deliverable was there, but I didn't make a big deal about it. And they came back with a bunch of ideas that were innovative, out of the box, whatever, but they failed to deliver the single most important thing, which was a new SKU. So this is the SKU. This is going to be the flavor, the scent, or whatever it is that we're talking about. And it's with this other brand. Like they thought of stunts, they thought of other products of other. They didn't come up with a product within that. And I blame myself for not being clear on the deliverable is X, and then it needs to be amplifiable with a stunt, with a whatever. But this is a thing that's going to be on a shelf next to their other products that are similar, but this is going to be co-branded with some other brand. So I think it depends on what you mean by the word deliverable. And the other thing, there's a reality that in the day-to-day grind of assignments, a lot of the work that we get is to create materials for media that has already been bought. And if you already know that 30-second TV has been bought and that $10 million of media is going to 30-second TV, as an example, then you know you need to develop a 30-second TV. And it doesn't hurt anybody to say, we need a 30-second TV. Now, that doesn't preclude from you come up with a great extension, you come up with a great stunt, you come up with a great new brand idea off of that. I'm all for, let's sell them on it. But you have to come with the homework completed before you can get extra credit. There's no extra credit if you don't bring the homework. And so the truth is, a lot of times we know what the deliverable is because that was locked and loaded by the media team that's not even in your agency most of the time, right? 6 months ago. They're coming to you because they want you to develop the creative that's going to run in that Instagram feed, in that Facebook feed, in that YouTube pre-roll, because they know that's where it's going.
I don't disagree with a single word you said, Harry. My point is that if you don't articulate that we want big thinking, you don't always get it. If all you're thinking is tactically,
Yeah.
direct mail, a new SKU, social, whatever the channels might be,
I
or
guess
all the channels.
the creatives I work with, I guess, are always swinging for the fences.
I know,
and
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 but that's
sometimes
a
yeah,
unique.
yeah,
Go ahead.
sometimes you have to you know hey, hit the ball off the tee and then
Yeah,
go running,
I'm talking about people who they're working for the in-house ad agency and they've got a very
Oh,
small world in which to exist. So they're panicking if they don't know what is it that I'm supposed to create, and they're thinking small. Whereas I want them to think big and then figure out how it's going to fit in the tactic. I've been working with people. I don't know if I've said it on our show or not. I've worked with marketers who write creative briefs when they have to change the font. It's like, wait, why are you doing that? Because they've got this small, and it's not their fault. It's just that's the expectation placed on them. They need to have a record. They don't need to write a creative brief for changing the font. It's a work order.
yeah.
So I want them to think differently about this brief. And
But they see the brief as a work order because
yes,
it has become a step in a long line of steps that has to be taken to move the
right.
sausage through the
So
factory.
when I walk into an environment where I'm working with marketers who write briefs, and they're struggling with this document along with 10,000 other things on their plate, I'm trying to change the way they think about the document entirely, so that they see this as with creative opportunities rather than just executing X, Y, and Z. So one of the briefs that I have used as an example of big thinking is the 2004 brief, written by an agency in London that doesn't exist anymore. It was folded into something else, but it was for the BBC's coverage of the Olympics in Athens. And they stated very clearly, everybody knows what the BBC does. Media, they do TV, they do radio, they do broadband, they probably do some outdoor and some print, but most of it is paid media. So they knew going in what the tactics were, but they still were very clear in their brief. We want a big idea that's going to travel across all of these channels. And that's what they delivered. Now you can debate whether the creative was any good, and we have, and I'm not sure it is, but the charge was right there, and that's my point, really. That's what I'm getting at. Okay, do you want to look at one of the examples or two of the examples of the briefs that
Before
they
we
chose?
do, before
Yeah,
we
anything
do,
else?
there was something I don't know if I had heard of this anecdote before or not, but it was the Michelangelo
Oh
thing,
yeah,
right? And it's
yes,
like,
I've used that in training. It's a great. I love it. You want to talk about it?
yeah. So it says, like it's an example of a creative brief. Like if you were commissioning Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel,
Yeah,
what do you think? This is like one of our exercises of like retrofitting. We see the work, what was the brief? And so
right.
you could say, well, the brief was paint the ceiling, right? And then Michelangelo, you could say, well, Michelangelo just on his own came up with this fantastic, thing. But then, you get down to, and it's like a multiple choice question. Please
Right.
paint the
B.
ceiling using red, green, and yellow paint, which is a little narrower. But so to me, and I would argue that the real good brief isn't even among these five given. Um,
Well, I think there is a brief here, and I think you would qualify as a decent brief, but I wouldn't call it a great brief.
so I like E, which is paint our ceiling to the greater glory of God as an inspiration and lesson to his people. I think that's perfect.
Yeah,
But then it goes on and it says frescoes should depict the creation of the world. Like that to me is too um uh
prescriptive.
prescriptive.
I think they're
Basically,
deliverables.
yeah. So
Those are deliverables.
well,
But
I would say the deliverable is it's gonna be 100 feet long. It's gonna be on the ceiling. It's got to last at least 200 years. Whatever.
well, do you suppose that Pope Julius II is going to put up with that kind of pushback? He's going to say, this is what the damn thing's going to have to include. It's going to have to show this and it's going to have to show that. But you paint it any way you want. Although, if you watch the movie, what was the movie with Charlton Heston and Richard Harrison? The agony and the ecstasy, and one of those 1950s, movies.
Never saw it.
Oh, well, it's if you want to see two stars going at it, Charlton Heston playing uh Michelangelo and Rex Harrison playing Pope Julius, that alone is worth it. But he keeps walking into the Sistine Chapel and saying, "When will you finish? When will you finish?" So he was under pressure. But I agree with you, and I have used this as an example of things to think about that are elements of brief and how to determine what's a good brief and a bad brief. E is, I think, the best of the five, but it's certainly wanting. It has room for improvement. But in that spirit, let me scroll down and let's take a look at some of the examples of the briefs. This one is for the New York Yankees partial season ticket brief. I gather this is a real brief. So this is a 2.5 page brief. So they have a behavior objective. What will success look like? There's a target, motivating insights. In first person, I'm part of this team, a real fan. Seeing the Yankees win reinforces who I am. Key benefit, Yankee partial season ticket, provide an affordable way to attend in person with friends. Reasons to believe, brand character. Now they've got media, deliverables, timing, media, budget, and they wrap up with legals and things like that. It's short in the sense that it's easy to consume.
There's
Um,
a lot of space.
yeah,
It's 3 pages, but it's really like page and a half
right.
if you like didn't have so much space between each block. And this is what I would characterize, and we've talked about minimum, a brief should be clear. And
Yes.
I think that this reaches that minimum threshold. Is this
Yes.
inspiring?
No.
No. But
No,
it's
I don't think so.
but it's clear somebody could work off of this. You
Hmm.
know, a talented creative, like, doesn't have to be at the level of the people we mentioned earlier, but a talented creative could take this clear brief, inspire himself, and come up with something great. Um,
Yeah.
there's there's an interesting thing here that I would have liked to have seen blown out, and see if you can guess what I'm talking about.
Motivating insight.
No,
Okay.
there's a very loaded word, psycho, a fan who lives and breathes the Yankees.
Oh,
That,
that's I think helped inspire the insider, and the insight maybe inspired. Yeah, that's interesting.
but I would love to see a paragraph telling me about how this psycho lives and thinks. Okay. What makes him a psycho? Like, what separates this fan from other, like, maybe armchair fans or what? Like, that to me is a provocative thought, that a route, an open door that they didn't go through. And
I will go even further. I agree with you 100%. I'll go further and say I think you could dump everything else and blow that out, and you have a great, much better brief. Especially if you were to put it into. It doesn't have to be in first person. You know me, I'm really big on writing that in first person, as if the customer was talking to me as the creative. To do what you always say is important, to write that, create that costume for the creatives to step into and see the world through their eyes. That blown out alone, I think, would improve this brief uh, by order of magnitude.
I mean,
It's a good point. Good point.
there is a description here. It talks about the
Yeah.
category usage, but the language falls far short of that definition of psycho. And
Yeah.
so I would have liked to have seen that paid off in within those other sections about the target, and which, by the way, all that could have been together. It didn't have to be into. Maybe that's the form of this brief, and that's fine. Like we said, the format doesn't matter as much as the content. But I think
Right.
they introduced an idea that to me is creatively fertile,
Yes.
but they didn't
But
pay it off with the
right.
subsequent descriptive copy.
But untapped,
Okay.
because there are a couple of other creative briefs, and we could debate the merits, the good, the bad, the in between. I think the overall power of this document is to reiterate what you said, Henry. It's more good information that clients can learn from. It is not meant to be a class on how to do that. There is a page or two in the document that iterates those classes that the ANA offers to do precisely that, and one of them is mine. So this, I hope, becomes a spark, a little flame we can put under the butts of our clients
More
to learn more.
adding to the discussion of briefs. Why wouldn't the Brief Brothers like that?
We would absolutely love this. That doesn't mean I can't put on my critical thinking hat and say we can do better. We can do better. But in any event, good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
He's Howard Eibach. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time.
Bye.